Hello, and welcome to Sandbox Sunday on RQ Streams with me, your host, Anel, community manager for Rusty Quill, for anyone who does not know. Hope you are all doing well this Sunday afternoon, morning, evening, whatever time it is in your part of the world. Hey folks. So, a little bit of admin before we start. Yes, I felt, given the topic for today, it was probably appropriate that I wore my Hamid t-shirt. Oh, hang on. Let me just up my volume a little bit so that I can hear myself. Yeah. Oh, yes, I like cetaceans. We are definitely getting into quarantine hair here. I haven't decided whether or not I won't cut it until the end of the lockdown, or if I will actually just get. I mean, look. I mean, you can't. Oh, you may not be able to see it, but like it's reaching all the way down to my eyebrow now. Or whether I will just get fed up and use the clippers that Bryn bought. Embrace the floof. Yes. Yes. So a little bit of admin before we start. Welcome. This is RQ Streams, and we are supported by your generosity, either by direct donation. Here, there is a button down below. Alternatively, you can support the channel by subscribing. We are Twitch affiliated, so we get a cut of that. Or by joining our Patreon at www.patreon.com/rustyquill. And you'll be able to get bonus content depending on what tier you sign up at. Relating to the various podcasts we put out. And if you're not familiar with our output, we put out 3 shows a week, and you can find details of all of them over at www.rustyquill.com. And yes, quick reminder that as of the current times, 10% of our monthly Patreon income will be donated to the World Health Organization COVID-19 Solidarity Response Fund. So by supporting us, you can also support the global efforts there. Anyway, on to today. We are on a Sandbox Sunday, which means it's trying out something new. Trying out new things to see if they work, and fill in for other things. We are going to try doing an RPG advice corner with me, GM Anil. I'm going to hopefully answer some of your questions. Oh, beg pardon. I've only just had lunch, so cat for chat. Alas, that we have no cat here. Perhaps we should get. I have no cat, but I do have my co-GM Hamid here in crochet form to help me and provide advice. Although I do suspect that a lot of that advice might just be fireball it. Hopefully you'll be providing more nuanced questions to where the answer will not necessarily be throw a fireball at it. So what we're going to do today is, if you can stick any questions that you have in chat, and I believe Zalia Chimera, one of our mods, will be on hand to stick that into a document for me in case I miss anything. And alternatively, I will be keeping an eye on the Rusty Quill Discord, so you will be able to drop me a question in there as well. In case your question is a bit too long for the Twitch chat itself. Apologies if I don't get to your question, or apologies if I can't quite answer your question today, because there are certain things I'm not going to touch on. Questions regarding things like interpersonal etiquette, what to do if you have a conflict at your table, I want to leave to one side for the time being. Alternatively, if you have any questions about consent or issues about yes, no, veils, lines, those sorts of things, I want to leave those to the side again for for the purposes of this Q&A, this advice session, if you are interested in those topics or do want to learn more about it, we do have a podcast on the RQ Gaming feed about sensitivity in gaming. Metacast 8 or 9, I believe it is. It's the most recent Metacast that we put out. So, as to why I can be doing this, or why I might choose to do this, I've been gaming since 1997. Yes, January 1997 is when I started gaming. And I have been a GM since maybe 1998, on and off over the years. Obviously, while I was at uni, I had a dearth of gaming, but on and off since those years. I have had a long and varied RPG career. So hopefully, my years of experience will be able to offer you a little bit of suggestions or advice on where to go. Obviously, what I am not intending to do is say you should do this. I want to maybe give you some suggestions about how to think about things, or things that I might do if I were in your position in those circumstances. Again, I don't know every system. I don't know every game. But I may ask further questions if I don't know the system that you are running. Additionally, feel free to ask about non-Pathfinder or non-D&D, because remember, D&D is not the only game, regardless of what certain companies might want you to think. I guess, like, D&D is a very good game system for a given set of circumstances, and D&D 5e in particular has been very good at getting new people into the game. But I don't want people to be under the illusions that I think that it is the only system that we are going to talk about today, or that folks can ask questions about. So I am going to start with a fairly general question that I know comes up a lot when you think of topics like this, and that's about GMing itself. And a lot of people ask, who are worried about GMing, who have never GM'd before. My general advice for that would be, if you feel comfortable with the people you will be GMing for, do it. You will gain valuable experiences regardless of how it actually goes. And assuming that you are gaming with friends, they should be supportive of you. I'll give you a little story about my first time GMing a game. So we were playing Advanced Dungeons and Dragons 2nd Ed, so AD&D 2e this time, so this is 1998. And I'd been playing for just over a year at this point. And I'd read all the rule books I had available to me, all the bonus stuff that I had bought, and in particular, the book that had very quickly stuck with me was a book called Faith and Avatars. It was later written as Faith and Pantheons in 3rd Ed. A source book for the Forgotten Realms setting. And it talks about the fantasy mythology of that setting, and I got very enamored by this. And one of the things that it listed were stats for avatar forms of the gods, and I thought it would be a really interesting thing if I ran a game where the players could come up against these avatar forms. Obviously these avatar forms are a lot weaker than the god itself, the power in question. And so I wrote something along those lines. I started the players off at, I think, level 10 or 11, and basically launched into a game along those lines. Suffice to say, it didn't go very well. I committed pretty much every cardinal sin that you should not do when you are GMing a game. I railroaded. I tweaked things on the fly inconsistently. I got annoyed when people didn't actually do the things that I thought they were going to do, and I invalidated character choices. So there was like one particular fight where the high-powered wizard. So we had a party of 4. One of the characters was a wizard, another was a high-level cleric, and I did a fight, like, I think it was first or second session. One of the fights involved a anti-magic field, or at least a golem that was impervious to a lot of magic. And the player who was playing the wizard quite rightly turned round to me at the end and said they weren't happy with the fight because essentially they were a weak man with a stick. And whilst that wasn't necessarily criticism I was necessarily in the right frame of mind to listen to, like, looking back on it, it's like, yeah, I basically looked at what they were doing and made an encounter that didn't actually allow people to participate in. So yeah, there are if you can take that as cautionary tale, there are now plenty of places and plenty of forums from which to get advice on how to start a new game. But what I would really do is, as I say, hopefully you are gaming with friends who are going to be supportive of your efforts. Also, know where your comfort levels lie. Don't go too high level. So for, like, if you're starting a new game of 5th Ed, I would probably suggest not starting characters out at any higher than like 3rd level. If you're talking about things like let's see, if you're talking about Scion, I wouldn't start them off at more than Legend 1 or 2. If you were talking about what systems can I really think? Because not every system operates on the same like level based system. But basically, start at the lowest level and work up. It may not necessarily gel with the plans that you had in mind for a particular narrative or a story, but at the end of the day, you're trying to tell a collaborative tale, and working with others, and starting off at a comfortable level should be your baseline. So let us see what is on the cards for questions. Okay. Okay, I'll start with Plum177. You asked a question which is tangentially related to that. So I was going to say, is there anything you can do to help with getting the confidence to GM for the first time, other than just do it and you'll get better as you go on? You can do things. Learn from other people. Watch APs. Listen to podcasts. Take notes from what your friends are doing. All of these will hopefully give you at least building blocks. And if you have foundations, there are plenty of sites and forums from which to get advice as well. If you have that foundation, then hopefully that will give you confidence to be able to breach the barrier. Obviously, that is a lot easier said than done. There are plenty of reasons why you might not have confidence to do it. Social anxiety, writer's block or anything like that. All of those are valid reasons why you might doubt your confidence. But it's one of those things where you need to try it and see. I mean, I know do it is unhelpful, but it isn't unhelpful if you have done some reading, if you've done some research, if you know the kind of game and the kind of people that you are dealing with. So I hope that answers your question. Obviously, as soon as I come on stream, my nose starts itching. Totes unprofesh. Oh well. Bittercape, what is, in your opinion, the best way to get to know a new system? As a relatively new player, I've played mostly 5e and Monster of the Week, but I'll play a few games in other systems soon. Do you have a favourite approach? My approach is I consider myself, I fancy myself a bit of a game designer. I am working on a couple of projects, notably the TRPG system that Rusty Quill is looking to put out. Hopefully more on that later this year. And so as a game designer, I want to learn about a whole bunch of systems and mechanisms and things. So I do a lot of reading about it. So the way I would approach a new game is trying to read up as much as I can about it, and get to grips with at least the character creation options. Now, necessarily not every system has like freely available resources, and of course there is the investment in books, which can be quite expensive. So if I don't have immediate access to the source materials, go online, see if people have been talking about it, and ask the people who have suggested the game to you, if you can, are there any resources or any suggestions that they may be able to offer you? You know, bullet points, handy hints about what to look for or what to look out for. If you're dealing with a system that is particularly well known, then that shouldn't be a problem. Obviously, things that are based on Apocalypse World, games that are powered by the Apocalypse, things that are based on or off D&D, things which are based around, Monster of the Week is a powered by the Apocalypse game. Things that are based around the interlock system from Artalthorian Games. These are like popular enough systems that people will have written about them. So you should be able to find out at least some info before going to the game. Obviously, you may just end up being thrown in at the deep end, and your GM should give you the info you need to know in order to be able to play the game, and then you can hopefully after that go and find out more about it. Malevolent Mango asks, what's your process when you start writing a new campaign? What inspires you and motivates you? Good question. So when I start writing a new campaign, I will usually what I will have done is I will have had a hook like percolating in my mind, and often this is inspired by something I have read, something I have seen, and thinking that that makes a really neat idea, like a throwaway line in a show, or an image that I see online, or such might stick, and it's like, oh, that's a really neat idea, or that gives me that gives me an idea. I'll then go and I'll jot it down, try and flesh out the idea, and see if it actually has any legs. Often, they don't go anywhere. I have got plenty, or I've had plenty of notebooks and journals which have ideas that sounded good in my head and just then didn't go anywhere. I've got plenty of documents of games and campaigns that I would love to run, but I've just not had the time or such. So, and some of those get worked on periodically. I haven't run a game myself for a number of years for various reasons. But I am looking to start again, and so I will go back and look at the documents I've got and see. So when I start writing a new campaign, what also inspires me is the setting info. So often, I'm not so much a homebrewer of worlds. As much as I love world building, I am better when I am playing in other people's playgrounds, if that makes sense. And particularly with a lot of the D&D settings, so things like Forgotten Realms, Spelljammer, Planescape, the existing source books were very good, particularly at particularly in second ed and third ed, of providing hooks, of providing lines about here is something that is going on in a region. Would you like to? And it's like, would you like to take that and run with it? So a lot of my games have started off on that basis. What else inspired me? I ran a very short-lived Alternity game back when Wizards of the Coast tried to put out a space adventure version of the D20 rules, and that was based on the game that I wrote for that, or at least the campaign that I wanted to write for that, was based on a short-lived cartoon series called The Pirates of Darkwater. So the crew of the ship were going to basically be running around various star systems looking for treasures. The other thing is, like, if you are having trouble thinking of an idea, don't be afraid to use tropes. Tropes are tropes for a reason. Visit tvtropes.org. I know that's a dangerous thing to say, but a brief scan of TV tropes may just give you a hook and give you suggestions of where to look for things which have developed or run with that hook, so that you have more ideas for it. Okay, I hope I'm going to pronounce this right, because I know you did a guide in the Discord for how to pronounce this name. It's Lahaism. Sorry, it's supposed to be a rhotic R, I think. Lahaism. Hopefully I've got that right. Asks, any tips on balancing between railroading and guiding the players when they get stuck or otherwise? This is a very difficult skill, and it is very much a skill that you learn as you go through playing. The peering behind the screen answer is they are almost one and the same. The problem is when it becomes, in inverted commas, obvious. In essence, railroading gets a bad name because often it is used in circumstances where the GM is trying to force the players to go down a predefined route that they have in mind. Usually this is when the GM is acting antagonistically to the players and has a fixed outcome in mind. So one of the ways to avoid that is not to have a fixed outcome. The GM may write a story, but at the end of the day, you cannot necessarily guarantee that the players will investigate it, that the players will actually get to the end of it, or anything like that. But what you can do is offer... Incentive sounds like the wrong word, but you can pose options for your players, and obviously, depending on how the game is going, one of those options could be more attractive than another. But always be aware that they may not necessarily take up that option. It isn't a big secret that that a GM may offer or suggest incentives for doing something. That's just the give and take of a game. If that happens to coincide with what the GM wants you to do, great. But also don't feel cheated as a player if you are doing this, because remember, games are give and take. The GM is not against you, or rather, the GM should not be against you as a player, and as a player, you should not be looking to make your GM's life difficult. This is not a them versus us situation. You are all looking to have a good time. You are all looking to play this game. So by making sure that options and incentives are how you frame your choices and how you frame the adventures, everyone should have a better time by understanding that and by playing through those options. Obviously, a lot of this comes from confidence in being able to, say, improvise or overplan. I am not the world's best improviser, so I tend to overplan. I will think of, like, for most of the options that I pose to my players, I will have at least thought of the likely routes out of that option and plan accordingly. But you cannot plan for everything that your players will do. The age-old adage is that no plan survives contact with the players. Obviously, the better you know your players, the more you can anticipate what it is that they are likely to do. And this is, as I say, this is all part of the give and take and part of knowing who you are playing with. Oh, hey, Bryn. That phrase normally ends enemy, which is not what you're playing. Yeah, I said that. The players are not the GM's enemy, and the GM is not the player's enemy. So hopefully that's covered that. Hyla Frostcat, what kind of encounters would you write for a party that does not like combat, but also not strong with puzzles? That's an intriguing question. If they don't like combat but are not strong with puzzles, make your encounters along a third axis. So there is a reason why, particularly in stat-based systems, which not stat-based systems, attribute-based. Actually, I mean, generally, stat-based systems probably works. Attribute systems will often give you a guideline for a guidance for the kind of things that players can do. So, in D&D and D&D style games, you often have the 6 stats: strength, dex, con, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. If you are, and actually, better example, most of the White Wolf systems will group, like White Wolf systems tend to have like 9 stats, 9 attributes rather, grouped in sets of 3, and those 3 are physical, social, and mental. If your players are not very happy with the physical, and they're not very happy with the mental, choose the third axis, social. Use encounters that play on common sense, that play on emotions, that play on being able to talk, that play on the social side of things that don't necessarily mean that you have to think your way out of a situation, don't have to fight your way out of a situation. But Bryn actually just had a really good answer there. Players love a good ball. If you have social characters, put them in social situations, or actually, even if you have players who are not very good at the social, but if they don't like puzzles and if they don't like fighting, put them in a social situation and give them something to figure out, to find a way through this. A ball is actually a really good way of thinking, because you can throw a lot of different people at the party to give them different encounters. Send them on a job to rescue a cat from a tree, or things like that. Play on their emotions, but also look at the other thing is, look at the skills that they have. Look at the things that your characters can do. Look at the things that your characters want to do. Ask them if you are having trouble of coming up with oh wow, thank you very much, Cucumber Kale, for the host. That is very much appreciated. Why is my feed not updating? That is weird. I hope OBS hasn't crashed or anything. Yeah, and actually, Bryn has a good idea. Give them tasks where they need to have a certain number of roles to do in order, and either things get easier or things get harder depending on how well they successfully. Murder mystery dinner party, really good social situation to put players in. Yes, actually, Malevolent Mango, that's it. Skill challenges. And here you can use the combat framework if you need to, or an encounter framework, to run things along those lines. Plum177, how do you get the balance between prepping so much it doesn't all get used versus prepping very little and having to riff it? Personal preference. I know that's not really a great answer, but it all comes down to your own GM style. As I say, I have been GMing for 20 mumble years, and I still don't have. I still over-prepare, as I mentioned earlier. I have reams and reams of notes of things which may or may not, which often don't get used. If you are in the Rusty Quill Discord, I believe the RPG chat channel has a pin in it where I have the document that I sent out to the players of one of my campaigns. I think it was the campaign was Secrets of the Verdant Emerald, a third ed Forgotten Realms campaign, and that that document that I sent out lists all the plot threads and storylines that were outstanding at the time that the game ended. And you'll see that there was a lot of stuff and a lot of prep work that didn't get used. My feeling on over prepping is that even if it doesn't get used in the game that you are running, it may offer you a head start on a secondary. It's pinned in the game's general channel. I should probably put it in RPG chat, because I think that's what gaming became games general. Yeah, I should probably move that actually. I find that material I have written that didn't necessarily get used will often inform games that I will run in the future, either one shots or subsequent campaigns. Thank you very much, Thalia. That will be most appreciated. Versus prepping very little and having to rip it. Depends on how good you are with improvising or coming up with things on the fly. The case in question, particularly here, is for folks who have listened to a lot of the Rusty Quill Gaming podcast. Grant Howitt, he is an absolute joy to watch GM, because he doesn't prep very much. He is very much a let's come up with something on the fly. Often let's come up with something collaboratively, and push forward. Okay, Bracer Filter, which is Bryn's improv that shtick. Yeah, if you are comfortable with improving, if you are comfortable with riffing off your players, then that is a perfect way. Obviously, most GMs are going to fall somewhere in between this. But if you are somebody who likes prepping and is not so comfortable with the improv or riff side, there is nothing wrong with saying that's a great saying to your players if they come up with an idea or go down a route. It's like, great. If you want to pursue that, that's fine. I would like some time to develop that. You don't necessarily have to jump every time that your players said, because obviously you want to give them a good experience. You want to give them the best experience and game that you can. So it's perfectly say, okay, let's stick a pin in this and either do something else, do something simpler, or let's end the session here and I will come back to do that. Obviously, in one shots that's not necessarily a problem, but many one shots it's like they are low prep, or you won't be over prepping anyway for them. Improv is hard for a long period of times. I can't say engage for like 5-6 hours. Yeah, exactly. Being on improv wise for 5 to 6 hours is not a good idea, especially if you are running a game. I will only tend to run long sessions when I know that the session is mostly going to be based in and around the stuff that I have written, and stuff that I know, or stuff that I know well enough that riffing off it or improving off it isn't going to be a problem. Even at the improvathons, which are like 24-hour, 48-hour improv jams, and we're talking about physical theatre, actual physical improv here. The actors cycle in after in and out after a couple of hours, because being on like that is so difficult. Joy says, I had a GM who would prepare so much, but the players would make unexpected choices and he would end up having to improvise most of the time anyway, so he cut down on prep and just went in knowing it would be a lot of improv and it really worked. Yeah, if you're comfortable with it, it is the sort of thing that comes with practice. Crafting Entropy says, I find improv a lot easier with people I'm close friends with. Again, comes down to trust and knowing groups. I am a lot more comfortable improving and riffing off things and actually being able to say to them, give me 5 minutes or give me 10 minutes. Particularly because, especially if you're like, you've just started a session and it's already gone it's already gone off kilter, or if you if it is a one shot and so it's like, feel free to step back and say, look, I need 5 minutes just to think about this, and then we'll get back and I'll be able to take it through. Question from Bittercape. When planning a one-shot or similarly short game, how can I estimate how much time is needed? First time GMing, my players spent nearly 20 minutes on donuts, which was hilarious but inefficient. Oh, wow! You're all asking the hard-hitting questions here today. The answer is I haven't. The honest answer is I haven't quite worked that out. Usually, the best answer I think I can actually come up with is prepare less than you think. The general answer is players will, unless you are very good at timekeeping, or the game forces an element of timekeeping, then players will always take longer to do things than you expect them to, especially if they have to come up with a plan. Now, what I would suggest is don't, for short games, be very clear about objectives, be very clear about what characters can do, and be very clear about making things relatively simple from the perspective of achieving those objectives. Don't give lots of threads and hooks and jumping off points for the things, because the more diversions that a player can take, the more diversions a player is likely to take. And you also end up with things like indecision paralysis, which is a very common thing, especially when you are under a time pressure. One game that actually does work really well with planning and around time is a game called Dusk City Outlaws, where it is every game is effectively you are looking to plan a heist, but certain, like your day for that is split into two parts: a planning phase and an action phase, and the planning phase is very strictly set at 15 minutes. You set a timer, and the players have 15 minutes to discuss what they are going to do, what they want to get, and how they are going to go about it. Then the execution phase is them role-playing how they do that. Sharko says, time flies when we're having fun. Yeah, it really does. So the balance is... estimating how much time is needed. If it is something... I mean, I don't know if I've particularly answered your question there. I think I rambled off a little bit. But if you're doing a one shot or such that is pre-written, then it doesn't hurt to go and look up how long other people have taken to run it. Ask advice from, if it is a pre-written thing, go and ask other people who have done it how long they took, if there are any suggestions for them. Yes, it was Dust City Outlaws by I cannot remember his name. Rodney Thompson. That's it. Really good game. I ran it at Nine Worlds a couple of years ago to reasonable effect. Okay. We've answered K Knight's question more or less, but there was a bit about. Do you have any recommendations for being more comfortable with improv when your GM wants a lot of character interactions, particularly when the games are online and over voice chats? Yeah. There is a reason I like my games to be in person, or at least so that I can see the see the other players, because I work better when I can see the other player, and I GM better, I think, when I can see other players. Oh gosh, really itchy today. The part of the question that like concerns me actually is when your GM wants a lot of character interactions, and this actually speaks more about the expectations of your GM, and how they want things to go. Hopefully, and I know this isn't always possible, particularly in one shots and particularly in online games, that you will have at least had a brief chat about how you expect the game to go, what you and the GM both want out of the game, and how comfortable you are with playing. This goes back to the notion of a session zero, and I don't actually want to talk about session zeros now, because I think that is a discussion topic, all of its very own, and I think. And I have a plan on how I want to touch on that. But character interactions, I say, don't necessarily have to be voiced in character, and I'm a very firm believer on this, because your comfort levels vary, and comfort levels can vary by medium. Doing something, or at least saying, my character does X, my character says X, rather than voicing everything in character, should be as valid for your GM as each other. So long as you are able to say what your character wants to do and say, I would hope that is fine with your GM. Obviously, if you are having trouble thinking about what your character would do or say, then alas, that is a separate issue. I'm afraid. I'll take care, Saffron. So where are we? X Kyler JX. How do you deal with players who adamantly avoid plot, especially in a party where some are very keen for plot? Actually, before I answer this question, I will say you don't have to necessarily keep your questions about gaming theory or gaming practice. I am happy to answer questions from players if you are having trouble coming up with character concepts and want some advice on like background ideas and things like that, or if you want to workshop ideas about a campaign you are thinking of running but having a little bit of a start. Let's see if we can, if you are interested in trying to get some ideas about where to go on that front. I don't necessarily want people to think this is all just about gaming theory. Yes, Escala JX. Deal with players who adamantly avoid plot, especially in a party where some of you are very keen for plot. Depends on what the game is. In a one-shot, that may not be a solvable problem. You may just have to pick one and go with it. If it is a campaign or a longer-running game, this is something that probably should have been dealt with in Session 0. because that is talking about game expectations. The question is also about what constitutes plot, because I am a firm believer that plot should be what your characters want to do. It's not and this goes back to the notion of like game running against like player versus GM expectations. Plot is what your players want to do within a given framework. So if you have counter running plots, then it's a question of, well, that's a negotiation thing, because you will probably have to switch between competing interests, and that's a question of giving everyone enough screen time to be able to effect what they want to do. And hopefully you might even be able to tie those things together. But it is a case of talk to the different groups or talk to the various players and actually find out what they want to do. Find out if what they are is plot averse, or if they are just not engaging with the options and the choices that you have presented them with. And therefore tweak those options to be more appealing. It comes back to this idea of incentives. Make sure that the incentives that you are offering your characters, or offering your players, tie in with the goals and objectives that they want to do. So yeah, it's a bit of a negotiation, and as I say, it loops back round to that notion of, well, it's not really railroading if you are presenting an option that that the character wants to engage with. Lahaism says, piggybacking off Plum, what are the kinds of things that you think are the most important to prepare for in advance? That is as open-ended a question as anything. Most important to prepare for in advance. Encounters, giving those options to your players, and working out how they can do it. It's size a big mood. It really is, because that's not actually a question that is. Okay, how can I put this? It's not a question that has a reasonable answer, I'm afraid. It's what is important will vary by scenario. What is important will vary by players. I think the most important how do I put this? What I think is actually fundamental to your preparation is understanding the situation and understanding motivations. If you understand the situation that you are putting your players in, then you will be more ready for the things that may be thrown at you and the questions that you are asked. Understanding what it is you are presenting, I think, is actually a fundamental thing. So that is the most important thing to prepare, maybe. I just want to quickly go back to the to something that Xcolor JX said, I love my players, but the party has changed since the first game. That's actually a really interesting adjunct to the question, because if your party changes, if a character dies and has to be replaced, we do have a podcast, a metacast on the RQ Gaming feed about change in campaigns. But I would say do not be afraid at that point to do another session 0, to run a session to make sure that the characters can align, that all your players are on board with the new player coming in, and that motivations and character backgrounds can mesh, so that you don't have massive conflicts in things. And I know that I am guilty of not having done that sort of thing in the past. So I've had games where new characters have come in due to party death and been disruptive, because while on paper that player has discussed the character with me, I haven't necessarily sat down and gone, oh, hang on, that might not interact with that character very well when it comes to a motivation, or just not recognised because of something else in another character's background, why they might not gel. Sometimes problems don't become apparent for a while, or something in a game changes a character's outlook. There is that, of course, and again, communication is the key here. Being able and being not afraid to say, let's pause, talk about this out of character, and see what we can resolve is a thing. Don't be afraid to rewind. This is something I actually came across quite recent. This is an idea I actually came across quite recently. It was actually very well codified in, not codified, but very well explained in one of the sessions from the virtual HorrorCon that ran a couple of weekends ago, and it was actually the session where Sasha Sienna was talking about. Was part of a panel talking about humour in horror gaming. But one of the topics that they touched on was the notion of, if something doesn't land right, or if it doesn't feel right for character reasons, for humour reasons, or anything like that, feel free to stop and rewind a scene. Obviously, you can't necessarily go back like multiple sessions to do that. But if it is something that has just happened and a player doesn't necessarily feel that is actually appropriate or such, don't be afraid to do that. I think that's something that a lot of us can learn from. Okay. I've been going for about an hour, so I'm going to take a quick break here and refresh my water. So yeah, get up, stretch, take a little bit of a comfort break. Where are we going? Let's take the break screen there. I'm going to run a quick ad, and I will be back in a few moments. So take care, folks. Hello, folks, and we are back. And I see while I've been away, wow, you have been extremely busy with your generosity. So thank you very much, Molietsu, with the 69 bits, nice, and another set of 69 bits. Also, thank you very much to Malevolent Mango for 100 bits, and Wonder Woman for 69 bits as well, nice. But also, wow, Molietsu with the 5 community gift subs. Amazing there. Thank you so much. If I can just find out who you gave those to. You gave gift subs to Welcome to the Channel, Paralytic State, Sir Roderick, Canahawk, Lenrily, and Quixotic Anarchy. Thank you again, Molietsu, for those gift subs. Wow, okay. Plum 177 hoping for Cozy Crew merch in the drop too. Ah, well. Let's just wait and see on that, shall we? So let's get back to your questions. Cucumber Kale, do you have any tips for encouraging players to roleplay as their characters? My tips generally would be, don't be insistent that they have to do it in character voice. Because different people have different levels of comfort and different levels of neurotypicality, not everybody is comfortable with a voice, and not everyone is great. And not everybody is comfortable doing full immersion like that. So the tips for encouraging is don't be strict about what you are expecting as roleplay in character. Don't punish people for not doing so. The converse is also true. Don't necessarily reward people for going above and beyond, or for doing that within your group, unless it is something you have specifically agreed on as a group. Now, we don't have the example that I can always come back to here is Exalted. Now, and I think it's present in a bunch of other like White Wolf systems using the Storyteller system. You can, when you are performing actions, when you are using skills, you can do things called stunting. You can do stunts in order to get yourself bonus dice on your action. And the way you stunt is by being very descriptive and being very inventive with describing the way you're taking the action. Now, generally speaking, that isn't a bad idea to reward people for good roleplay and for good ideas. Where it becomes a problem is if you have a group where one player is very talkative and others aren't, or where one player is always looking or angling to get those benefits over and above others. So this is an example where something that is a potential reward system for good roleplay can be abused, and this then generates negative feelings amongst the rest of the group. So when you are trying to encourage players to roleplay as their characters, make sure that you have got an environment that is conducive for them to do so. And again, this comes down to talking and communication, but also showing people how they act, or showing people what is good roleplay. And some of this may just be you are doing it with other players, but not expecting them to do so. And if they come on board, or if you pull them along, great, amazing. But you cannot force people to do that, and you cannot punish people for doing so, because that way therein problems lie. So like tips for the other tips you can use is also if you see clips of good roleplay in like APs or in audio or something like that, feel free to send them to the group. Don't send it to one player, because you don't want to single people out, unless that player comes to you for, do you have suggestions for doing this? Point them at other people. Point the group at other folks who you think are doing the sorts of things that you would like to see, and say, look, here is how they are doing it. Maybe you can pick up something from that, or maybe we as a group can pick up something from that. It's the sharing of experience is a good way of encouraging that as well, within a framework of, I am sending you this and I expect you to do this kind of thing. So, Oscar Loves the Sea. As a GM, how do you think you can make combat more interesting for players whose characters aren't very fight-based? A perennial question. Make sure that they have something to do is the simplest answer there. Even if their characters are not fight-based, make sure that their characters have either a secondary goal that needs to be accomplished that plays into their skill set, or that they can act as support, and that they understand and are happy with playing the support to the thing. Obviously, this isn't going to work for every fight, and this isn't going to work for every counter, but it is a question of making sure that you shine the spotlight evenly. It is possible that you will just end up in encounters where, alas, certain characters who are not combat orientated will not have much to do. The question there then is to ensure that the combat does not last over long, while still giving the combat orientated characters a chance to shine. And then ensuring that they have focus in other scenes where their skills have the ability to come to the fore. Hope that's an appropriate answer there. IRQ conflict. Bit of an oddball, but bouncing off the earlier question about voice chats and webcams, are there any conventionally face-to-face systems that you feel adapt particularly well to play that doesn't require speech? Short answer, I don't know. This is not an area that I have much in the way of familiarity with, or aren't necessarily reliant on non-verbal communication as the primary way of facilitating gameplay. The only one that I can think of is something like Microscope, where it's a collaborative world building option, and you are generally what you generally do is write down aspects of the world that you are generating, and lay them out on like index cards or post-it notes or something like that in order to generate your world. And then what you do is you sit around and go round and tell stories that are based in that world. What I could see is that you don't necessarily have to talk about those stories. What you can do is carry on telling the story, or carry on playing the game by continually adding bits and pieces to that thing. How effective it would be, I'm not sure. But yeah, as I say, it's not really something that that I feel that I have much experience in. There's also the issue about whether or not for accessibility reasons this is a particularly interesting question. And actually, if you pose this question on, there is a Discord server that Sasha Sienna runs, which looks at neurotypical players and game designers. But it's also looking at, I believe they also have various axes of disability in there as well, and that may actually be a question that you wish to pose in that forum. Jory says, "I appreciate Sasha so much for creating that space." Yeah, that actually may be a question more suitable for that space, or you may be able to get a better answer there. And I hope I'll try and tweet a link to that Discord server. Or if anyone has that, feel free to put that in chat. Or go look, or go find it on Sasha Sienna's Twitter page. She is at Sasha Sienna on Twitter. Escalar JX, you can share an RPG shout onto it. Yep, thank you very much, Thalia Chimera. Malevolent Mango asks, do you think it's important for the GM to do character voices for the NPC to make the world more immersive? Or is it okay for GMs to use the same method of character does this? I think it is okay for the GM to do that. Because not all GMs will be comfortable with doing voice work. Not every GM is a performer. So saying NPC does this, NPC says that is perfectly fine. If you are, it's also a question. It's also a case of leading by example, because if you are allowing characters to do that, and this is particularly for characters who may have issue even doing that or speaking up in that framework, doing it to yourself is a way of encouraging that behavior in others. Do I think it's important for the GM to do character voices? No. Do I think it's nice? Yes. I think if a GM is comfortable with it, it can help with making the world immersive and differentiating between characters. But it is not important or necessarily necessary to do so. Oscar, let's see. Question for everyone in chat as well, because a lot of people know more about this than I do. If you wanted to try your hand at GMing more indie RPGs, where would be a good place to start? Actually, yes, going back to the other question. Bryn says there are loads of ways to vary your voice even if you keep an accent. Yes. There are, just like changing the position of your tongue, where you say, like lowering and raising your voice just can help with those levels of differentiation. Want to try your hand at GMing more indie RPGs? Where would be a good place to start? Ooh. Depends on what you want, really. If you're looking just generally, look up lists of indie RPGs. Go to forums. Look on Twitter. Like find a list of things which sound interesting. I know, like, I mean, asking in our Discord for suggestions isn't necessarily a bad idea. There are plenty of YouTube recs or websites that will hopefully give you a list of RPGs. What's the other? The UK indie. The indie RPG group or something like that. Oh, I can't remember. It's the group set up by like Jay Isles, that includes like Rowan Rook and Deckard and Black Armada and such, who are more familiar with that. My general advice is read and research. I don't think there is really any other way of getting recs than that, and then just trying to look at ones that appeal to you. I know that's not really a really great answer, but yeah. Finding the groups and finding communities online where you can ask those questions. I can't actually give you any off the top of my head, as I say, other than asking in our Discord channels about in RPG chat. There are plenty of indie RPGs that I can talk about, but not necessarily knowing where a good resource to compile them is. I mean, I should probably look into that, actually. If you have local game stores, particularly if they are not hyper focused on D&D, even if it's a case of not necessarily the store owners knowing, browsing the shelves. Actually, there's no, they don't. Most indies don't actually advertise on drive-through, but that would have been itch.io often has has a good catalogue of indie games designers on them. So scanning through that might be a thing. Yeah, if I'm on service there and to have a local game store, well, actually. In these times, to be able to visit a local game store would be a good thing. Again, unfortunately, that's a different issue. I like citations. The people I play with don't really branch out for D&D, so trying other games feels pretty impossible. Yeah, I mean. That's when you go. I mean, you jump online. Well, you almost have to jump online and find groups who will branch out with you, and obviously that comes with a whole different set of social anxieties and barriers to entry. Hopefully, our Discord server isn't like that, and hopefully you will be able to find people of like-mindedness who are interested in playing other games. With you, or would be interested in learning how to play those games with you. Toys R Us, nice, nice username. Do you recommend one website or service to meet other people who want to play TTRPGs online with people who like Get? No. I don't think there is any one place. Different places will be appropriate for different people. I know there are subreddits, and obviously Reddit as a whole is is varying levels of garbage fire. But there are nice subreddits. There are pleasant subreddits, and I know that some of the gaming ones aren't too bad. So you can always ask in there. Conversely, if you do have access to other Discords or outside communities, just posing a question if you feel safe to do so. So alas, I don't think there is one gamers meet here kind of place. Alas. But of course, I know. I keep saying this, but there are plenty of, in particular, queer and queer friendly GMs and players on our Discord server, the official Rusty Quill Discord server. So that is one place that you might be able to either find other players, or who may be able to give you advice to do so. Oh, jeez. Let me just check. I think that's... if anyone has any other questions... let me just check, see if anyone has pinged me in the Discord at all. Oh no, that was just a pin. Okay. So, do other folks have any other questions about things? As I say, happy to answer character-related stuff, or specific GM plot points as well. Ooh, those are some interesting emotes. 7 other players. Wow. Hang on, somebody's talking about 62 players. What? In one game? I mean, the most I've ever run to is, I think, what was my largest group? The largest group I've ever GM'd for was 6 players. Let me think. 1, 2. Yeah, I think 6 players. And even then, in subsequent games with large groups, I've ended up splitting them. Oh right, okay. All of Twitch chat in a game. I mean, Twitch plays an RPG might be a no, Anil, you can't go down those lines of thinking away 60 hours and putting the whole of chat in a game. I don't know, maybe everyone could show up as an NPC. Actually, group sizes for first time gaming. Any thoughts on that? I would suggest that your first time GM does not go for group sizes that is bigger than 3 or 4. 4 players is a massive is actually a massive cognitive load for somebody who is not used to having to deal with that. Because remember, you're not just your cognitive load includes all the players, plus yourself, plus your scenario stroke notes. So a 4-player game with GM has a base of 6 of 6 load points. So depending on your ability to cope and multitask and concentrate on those load points, I would strongly suggest that your first time game as a GM does not really go beyond 3 or 4 players. K Knight 14 asks, I've been playing around with doing a mute bard since I'm more comfortable typing or just not talking in character, and I feel like I can make a compelling story with that. But do you think it would be too hard to integrate into a party or play? No. Honestly, no. So it obviously depends on making sure that your fellow players and your GM are happy with you doing this. Because obviously it's not a style that is going to be able to sit with everyone, but hopefully it is. It's not too. It's not too problematic for that, because, as you say, typing, writing, even making sure, like, even if your character is mute, you, the player, do not have to be mute. And probably better it isn't, because you will still be able to. You will still have to narrate your actions. Obviously, how far in character you get is you want to go is up to you. But I do not believe that there is any problem with mute characters in that respect. In fact, I believe the game is on YouTube, but the other group that I do a lot of my role playing with, Hint Plays, or Hint International, they ran a group, and actually this is a game. This was a Call of Cthulhu game run by Druttercup, who is a moderator in channel and on our Discord server. And she ran a Call of Cthulhu game where one of the characters was mute, and that game is up on YouTube, I believe. And you can go and see how they did it if you want a demonstration of a game of how that works in practice for that character. Zalia Chimera asks, you mentioned you're working on a TTRPG for Rusty Quill. How do you go about starting to develop something like that? Do you pick an existing system and base something on that, or is it worth trying to develop your own pared down one? All of those are valid. You can do any of those, but you have to make sure that your basic design principles of what you want to get out of your system align with that. Obviously, a good way of starting is, does any other system do what you want your system to do? If there is, don't try and reinvent the wheel. If it is a proprietary one, you will need to look at licensing and see whether or not see how much you can take or use from that system without necessarily having to pay for anything, or actively license the system for use in your game. Obviously, there are, we could have done something like. We could have done. Oh, did something happen in chat that? Oh gosh. Wow, I did not see that. Thank you very much, mods, for that. Okay, just a troll. Cool. Obviously, we could have done that, and powered by the Apocalypse. So Apocalypse World is a very popular framework to use for new games. We are not doing that for our system. Sorry, I'm just going to mute myself. But we are not doing that for our system. We have opted to design a brand new system from the ground up. But because that actually more aligns with our design principles than anything that we have seen or want to use to date. But that is very difficult, and that is also why it is taking us a long time to do so. But this is not this is not necessarily the stream for talking about that or thing. But generally speaking, like if you want to work on or design or homebrew your own system, oh yeah, Lucinora, I am fine. It's just it is just the general itchiness of allergies and such that are playing up. That only seem to trigger when I come up on stream. It's the observation factor. So yes, like if you are looking to design your own thing, look at what's out there, because obviously you don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel every single time, but see if what you want to do is actually design something from the ground up, or no, Plumhozo, I'm not allergic to you. And think, actually, tangentially, Oscar, I don't actually have hay fever, but I just I have quite itchy skin just generally, so it is it's more that. So yes, I keep getting distracted here. Don't do more work than you necessarily have to is very much a principle of designing almost in any field. But there are always limits and boundaries necessarily on certain things that you may want to adapt, or use or cobble together for your own. Wormo asks, tying into game design questions, are there any particular rules or mechanics that you like working with? Like, are there examples of mechanics you think work particularly well to create interesting game narratives? That's a very big question. Examples of mechanics you think work particularly well to create interesting game narratives. Ooh, that is interesting. Like, I do think, at a very base level, taking D&D 5e, because obviously that's something that most people will be familiar with. The advantage system, like if nothing else were to survive from 5e, the advantage system, the advantage/disadvantage system, is the one thing I would want to keep from that for other games. I do think that creates an interesting. It is a mechanic that works well within game narratives because it means that you are not hyper-focusing on incremental differences at critical points, but you still get the feeling of something I do or something in the environment is affecting my ability. Sinalicia says, no, disagree, it's too binary. It is very binary, yeah. But for the kinds of games that D&D, that 5e is designed for, I think that it works for that narrative. Now, I would not necessarily use it in all circumstances, and if I was going with a game that is, and I'm going to use old game design terms here, if I was going with a scenario or a game system that was predominantly simulationist, where you are, and what I mean by that is that the game as a whole is focused on presenting a situation and modeling that situation to a realistic outcome and degree, then advantage and disadvantage is actually very bad for that, and also very bad for the narrative. This is where things like Pathfinder, AD&D 2e, 3e, AD&D 2e, D&D 3e are a lot better at modelling it and modelling those narratives, because those incremental advantages, that spectrum of outcome, or at least that spectrum of influence, is more appropriate. for that. Not necessarily focusing on D&D. The 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 principle of what is it? Animas in Exalted, I think is a very good mechanic. Well, okay, I think the principle is a very good idea. So in Exalted, the different types of exalts, the different types of characters you can create, all have what is called an anima power, which you can activate, or I think in some degrees act passively, to give you a bonus or an advantage. But these are tied into your character inverted commas class, and do different things depending on what kind of character you are, and actually are very flavorful, and help drive the narrative for your character. Now, mechanistically, I don't think the implementation of all of them was very good. Certain solas, Knight, were better than others, Zenith, at least in Exalted 2E. But the principle there, and at least the underlying principle of the mechanic, I thought works very well for creating game narrative. And there are plenty of examples in other things. So going to Lovecraft-esque, the mechanic whereby, and this is a diceless system, in Lovecraft-esque, at the end of each round of narration, you write down what you think is the end outcome, and fold over the piece of paper, and then iterate on your investigation as you go along. And I think that's a wonderful way of both note keeping, but also showcasing how your mind jumps to conclusions, and I think that's literally what the mechanic is called, jump to conclusion, based upon new information that you are presented with. Anyone who hasn't checked out Lovecraft, I strongly suggest, if you like a cosmic horror game that doesn't necessarily has the trappings of being Lovecraftian without necessarily being Lovecraftian from a perspective of all the baggage that comes with that. Yes, Lovecraft-esque is a Black Armada game. I do talk about it a lot, obviously because I was one of the stretch goals, and you can find my poetry in that book. I hope that kind of answers your question, Wormo. I say it's a topic that's actually a question I could talk a lot about, but I don't necessarily want to overwhelm the rest of this session with it. Sharko asks, where do you guys take ideas for characters from? Any favourite inspiration? Not really. My character inspirations tend to come from... I mean, obviously, we are all inspired by the media that we consume. And consciously or subconsciously, a lot of my characters come from that. So it'd be hard pressed to say that the game I played in Bryn's Exalted game, which was a Twilight medic, was not inspired in some way by the various incarnations of doctors that I have watched on Star Trek. Running the gamut from Bones through to Julian Bashir, sort of thing. Elements of all of those doctors will almost certainly have played a part in the way that I created Aza Lorraine, even if I wasn't necessarily conscious of them for being so. But I just remember, like, often it's... I will say another source of inspiration is often either NPCs that I have created for other games, for games that I have run, is often a very good source of inspiration. So this goes back to the idea of reusing material that may not necessarily get used in a campaign or things for playing things. But so the key one here is I had a long-running game called... Actually, no, it was Secrets of the Verdant Emerald, and then these characters cropped up again in other games. Was it Secrets? Yeah, it was Secrets of the Verdant Emerald, and I think I used them again in Planes, Chains, and Thaumaturgy. But I created a race of like dark fae, who I called Sith. No real like connection to Sith in Star Wars, but there were a couple of character ideas from that, and they were recurrent NPCs in at least 2 campaigns, who I then used as a PC that I played in a Castle Falkenstein game. So Lyricane, because Castle Falkenstein used has the option of playing fairy characters. I decided, I will use that as the basis for the PC that I am playing in that game. So that's why you can see Margrave Lyricane appearing in that game. And again, this game is available on either Druttercup's YouTube channel or the Hint Plays YouTube channel. So we're ready for the chat RPG round now. Nice. So any favorite inspiration? No, like I've run and written so many different characters that actually being able to cite a favorite inspiration source, because as a GM I need to find ideas for a whole bunch of NPCs. Saying any one thing is a favorite inspiration is very difficult for me, at least. Okay, how are we doing here? We're coming up on 2 hours. I'm going to take another quick break here, and as I say, my water is getting a bit low, so I'm going to take a quick break, and I'll be back in a couple of minutes. See you soon, folks. Okay, we are back, folks. Someone asking about the poster behind me. Yes, it is Helsing, OG, the OG Helsing anime wall scroll, or you'll able to see it on wider shot when on some of the other VODs. Yes, it's Victoria and Alucard. I think you can only just about see Victoria's legs there, but yes. Do folks have any other questions? You thought it might be Full Metal Alchemist? Okay. Flashbacks to uni. Yes, I did watch the original Helsing with my anime group at university. That's where I kind of got very much into late 90s, early 2000 anime. We watched quite a few things, and also London Anime Club at the time. However, this is not an anime chat necessarily. I mean, look, I was for a time I was the operations officer for the Cambridge University Star Trek Society. So I don't think I've got any leg to stand on that front. Secretary of Sci-Fi Stock, Sandbox Sunday Anime Chat. I'm not sure. I'm not sure I want to open up for an anime chat because I have opinions on a very select time period of anime, and not much else either before or after that time frame. Like we are talking mid 90s to early 2000s, and that's about the frame of reference I have for at least in detail for anime. But that is not what we are. We are not talking about. There are much better people as Les Galendal to go to for anime history. So, does anyone have any more questions about RPG advice, GMing, or character that they would like me to weigh in on? If not, then I don't think we're going to go much longer because it has been a long weekend. Running 3 streams a week. I am going to do the self-care thing that we talk about, and make sure that I rest up for the rest of the day. So, Oscar Love C, literally not that deep, but how do you name a character? If you believe other people that I play with, it is throw apostrophes at the character and see what sticks. Now, I maintain that is not how I go about and name a character. But often I will see what other names are fitting for the time period, cultural reference, game style, racial aspects that I am going for. Baby name books are also really good, actually. Like lists of names. You can often find a lot of lists of cultural names online. The other thing I often use, actually, and this is slightly more for world building than necessarily character naming, although I have plenty of character names I've used this method for, is think of a meaning that I want think of an adjective or a noun that is associated with the character. Stick that into Google Translate and run it through either 1 or 2 levels of language. If it is language related to if the culture that I am playing a character for has a real world equivalent or inspiration, run it through the language of that place, see what comes out, and maybe tweak that word accordingly. What I find is running, obviously French and German are very easy ones to run things through, but like I say, Google Translate word name meanings, and throw characters that way. So, Oscar Lossi, my first game I panicked and named my character for a classic fantasy game setting, John Andrew Louis, because it was the most generic white boy name I could think of, and that way it was ironic. Now, here is something that I am a very firm believer of. If the game environment allows for common names that are like common names in the real world, Thomas, John, even with variations and such, there is no harm in using them. There is a reason why certain names are common. Your name, your character does not necessarily have to be like massively different from your cultural norm. I have played characters. I'm pretty sure I have played a Thomas. I have I have played a Thomas in a fantasy game. John the Blank. Yeah. Well. Yeah. I mean, X of Y. I mean, the game I'm playing in the Witcher game that is running is Loic of Craden. Loic being a relatively a not uncommon French name from a country that I have kind of like suggested is French as well, because there are places in The Witcher that are. I mean, Toussaint and I can't remember what the other thing, but there are a couple of places in the Witcher universe which are French inspired. So I have taken a name on that basis. Obviously, with things like elven, dwarven names and such, they tend to run a little bit more off kilter. But then, like, I've got a half elf in my current 5e game where I'm who's called Rufus. And yeah, I mean, his middle name is Pharrellin, but yeah. Thinking about family history is also cool. That way you can get son, father, work-based surnames are always good things, like if you are giving them multiple names. My recent character is named Rupert, says Wormo. Rupert is a strong name. I like that name. Hercules B4. No, the one thing that this is a little bit of a high horse rant here then. So I don't like characters or players choosing comedic names when the game does not have a comedic focus. Because for me that is a bit of an immersion breaker, and I think it's something that also speaks of folks haven't talked to each other with regards to character conventions and character compatibilities. Molietsu, so are you against Lady Fregella's name? I have to say that was an interesting concept. I'm not actually against that, because I think the style of character that Lucian is playing and the style of game that we are in is not 100% serious. We are not going for a down the line grim and gritty kind of adventure. Like, it is light-hearted and such, so that a childhood name of Lady Fregella for a horse is not a problem for me. Yeah. Thank you very much for the 69 bits, Moliatsu, that I missed. Nice. And thank you very much for joining the channel, XKylerJX, subscribing there with Twitch Prime. Quick reminder, yes, if you do have a Twitch Prime subscription, you do get a free Twitch subscription with that on a monthly basis. You do have to renew it every month, but you do get a free tier 1 sub that you can spend on any channel. Oh, that's not a problem. I am very, very grateful and glad that you have chosen to spend it with us. Oh, I don't know. Like, I like cetaceans. You giving a Norse character a Latin name. If there is a reasonable justification for it, I'm not against it. You know, loan words are a thing, and adaptations, acquisitions from other language is fluid, cultures are fluid. It is not unheard of or unreasonable to think that travellers have come back with a given name and passed it on to a thing, even if it is not necessarily within the cultural norms. Oh yeah, there are some very unfortunately first name surname. I mean, the one that always gets me is the Radio Force scriptwriter and comic writer Will Ing. I didn't, like, the first time I heard that on the Now Show, I did not believe that that was a real name until I later worked at a company with a guy called Andrew Ing, and Ing is a surname. So, any other questions that folks may have? We are just being very, very chill here for a lazy Sunday. I mean, if there aren't any questions, then what I might do is just talk about some of the campaigns that I have run. We vibing, yeah. So. What's the XLJX asks, what's the favourite character NPC you've played? Well, I've talked about player characters I have played in a previous stream. I think that's probably gone off, but expect to see that on our YouTube channel fairly soon, I hope. Okay, take care, Theo Oral. In terms of NPCs, I know I have played a number of NPCs that have given my players very visceral reactions. And I think... Let me think. Who is the one that... who are the ones that have created the most... So this is going back to D&D. As much as I say D&D is not the only game, it isn't, but it is a system I have played an awful lot in. So the two characters I would say that have generated the most visceral reactions in my players were in a third ed game. Actually, these were both third ed games. Yeah. So I talked about the Dark Fae race that I had created previously, the Sith. One of those NPCs was a guy called Viscount Morcaine. And this was, so the Sith race I created were basically Underdark Fae. So they were Fae who lived underground, but had very noble, very courtly, very traditional English folklore Fae aesthetics. I think I had read... what had I just read? I had read Jonathan Norrell and Mr. Strange by Susanna Clarke, and the way that Fae were depicted in that, I think, were a very strong influence on this race. Cucumber K asked me what I mean by visceral reaction. What I mean is that whenever this NPC showed up, and they were recurring NPCs, the players would get... Well, I considered it unnecessarily hostile. And would not necessarily be well predisposed to dealing with this NPC, despite the fact that said NPCs were not necessarily evil or downright antagonistic to them, but they were recurring thorns in their side. Obviously, so Viscount Morcane would turn out to actually be a proper villainous antagonist, but on first meeting, they were this was a campaign set in the Forgotten Realms, and the players were in Waterdeep and had encountered actually the NPC that I later played as a PC in the Castle Wolkenstein game, a guy called Lyricane, who was the brother of Viscount Morcane. They encountered him and got semi-embroiled in the in kind of like a revenge plotline, although not that they knew it at the time. Viscount Morcane was a trade representative from his race, or at least from the Kingdom of the Sith, which was in the Underdark, to Waterdeep. He was the ambassador for the Sith nation. The players got involved with him, and he was very courtly lawyer is probably the best way of putting it. He spoke very softly, very deliberately. He wasn't outright offensive, but he had the mannerisms of slimy lawyer. And this immediately put the characters on edge. Whenever they would meet him, and he would often crop up in urban environments where they were trying to do something and potentially be on the opposite side of a legal dispute or something like that. So yeah, whenever he showed up, there was very much our teeth are on edge kind of thing. Even if in instances where he proved to be helpful. The other one was what was her name? Her name was Corinna Axlinfall, and she was again, for anyone who's familiar with the Forgotten Realms, she was a red wizard, and so in that setting, the Red Wizards of Thay are a magocracy. Like, Thay is a magocracy. It is a country that is predisposed towards characters being evil. Not that necessarily all the characters are, but they are distrusted. The Red Wizards as an organisation are distrusted, and like anywhere from distrusted to feared for their rule and control of magic. Now, this was a different group of players encountered a lady by the name of Corinna Axlinfall, that she was after an artifact that the party were also pursuing, and I know I have mentioned this before, but probably not recently. So, party of 4 PCs are venturing through an underground temple, an underground semi-flooded temple of the Red Knight. The Red Knight being a deity concerned with strategy and tactics. They are after an artifact called the Diamond of Night. The players venture through this underground complex, or this semi-flooded complex, and enter the chamber where the diamond is resting, and they see it on a pedestal in the middle of the room. at the same time that they enter, they're coming in from, let's say they're coming in from the south. Doors at the east, west, and north also open, and in come 3 other adventuring groups. All in all, this scene now has 11 characters in it. It quickly becomes apparent that one of the other groups is not antagonistic to the players, although they are also after the artifact in question. The other 2 groups are antagonistic to the players and all the other groups. A conversation starts that involves all of these characters interjecting at some point or another. And we remember that 7 of these characters are NPCs, and I am talking for them and through them. So yes, there were moments where the player characters were just sitting back and watching me argue with myself for the between these various groups, who all had different agendas. Well, are you okay? Suffice to say, I learnt I would never do that again. But it worked, surprisingly. But one of the characters in the antagonistic group was this lady called Corinna Axenfall. She would show up time and time again as a general antagonist for the players. Often in situations though she was not directly, like they were not directly fighting. I think the fight that they had in this temple was probably one of the only direct confrontations that they had with her. She would often show up. So the outcome of this was that the PCs ended up getting hold of the Diamond of Night. They secured it for themselves and came to an arrangement with the other group that was non-antagonistic for it. Throughout the campaign, Corinna would show up every so often, either working against the PCs with some subtle machinations, or actively trying to get hold of the diamond again. And the climax of that campaign, and this wasn't Secrets, was it? No, this is the campaign that preceded Secrets of the Verdant Emerald. I can't remember what it was called. And it involved a group, basically my old gaming group from school. What was I going to say? The final session that we ran of that campaign involved the players having the artifact in their possession as they ventured through an outer planar tower, and there were a bunch of fights, and they ended up finding out like one of the big secrets for the campaign, and it involved one of the players having to remain in the tower as the guardian of this place. So it was a sacrifice that they basically had to bind themselves to the tower in order to safeguard certain things. So one of the players did this. The other 3 come back down the tower. When they emerge from the tower, standing outside it is Corinna Axenfall, and she is all by herself, and they have never seen her without an entourage before. So they are immediately on edge, and be surprised. Now, she then asks the party, I'm going to ask you one. I think this is the line, because obviously I don't have my notes here. And she has grown in power with the party. I think over the course of this campaign, the party have gone from level 5 to, I think, level 15 or 16. She asks of them, are you willing to do a deal for the diamond? They say no, or at least 2 of the characters of the 3 say no. The third one, whose name is Eric, after they say no, she looks at Eric and says, okay, Eric, let's go. Eric is holding the Diamond of Night at this point, having finagled, like, as they are going through, that he is doing so. He walks over to stand next to Corinna. She smiles, and they teleport away. So, the backstory here is that within the we all knew that the campaign was coming to an end, and the player for Eric was, admittedly, I probably would not do this now, but it made sense and felt appropriate at the time. I will caveat this. So, the player for Eric had been feeling a bit put out for a while, and wanted to find a way basically to take his character out. We worked together to come up with an exit strategy that felt fitting for his character and for the campaign. And so we engineered a betrayal scenario without telling the others. So it was an absolute shock to the other 3 players when he did that. I will say that the main reason I would not do this in the same way again is it created out of character resentment. It was born of out of character resentment, and it generated a lot more. So I would not do that in the same way again, as a dramatic effect and as a narrative moment. Like, I could not be more pleased with the way that it went, but it is very definitely not something I would do in the same way again. I would, if a player was not feeling in an appropriate mood to carry on because of out of character behavior, I would now work for better communication to solve the problem than necessarily what is effectively PvP justifications. Again, I put this down to being a somewhat immature group of guys in our early 20s. But yeah, there is. I mean, let's go. Alan cannot contain his evil glade. Oh, it's one of those moments that just worked. Like, I don't have a lot of those that I remember, but that is definitely one where I really enjoyed the way that it played out, even though, as I say, some of the residual effects were not were not ideal. I think that unless anybody does have any more questions, I think I may use that to draw this to a close. Once again, I'm so glad I play with a group of friends who massively respect each other, even when we're being absolute jerks and carrot. Yeah, and most of the people that I play with nowadays, I wouldn't be afraid of doing something similar with them, but played out different, but framed differently. Yeah. So long as I knew that, a character betrayal of that nature would not generate actual ill will out of character. Yeah, alas, unless you want to throw in a question at the end. But yeah, I think I think that's probably a good story to end on. If people would be interested in a general me just chatting about the actual campaigns I have run, I can probably see about finding some way to fit that into the schedule at some point. Yeah, GM stories, please. Okay. Sure. All right. I will find some way to. I'll find some way to see. Thank you very much for everyone who's been watching, listening, who tuned in, who submitted questions. I hope that my advice has been helpful. The caveated with, of course, the notion that these are only my opinions and advice. Do not take anything as gospel. These are my thoughts on things. Thank you very much for everyone who has given bits, who has subscribed, who has gifted. You can support this channel in multiple ways, either by direct donation, by subscribing, or by signing up at our Patreon at www.patreon.com/Rusty Quill. I have really enjoyed this. I do like chatting to you all. Thank you very much to the mods for all their help this afternoon. So yeah, what else is going on? I should throw to other folks. So at 6:30 p.m. there is a stream on the Hint Plays channel, www.twitch.tv/hint_plays. I believe Shard Angel is taking the GM's chair for the start of a not mutant, Eclipse Phase game, which should be very interesting. Eclipse Phase is not a game game system that I have a great deal of familiarity with, so I shall hopefully be watching that. So that's in approximately 2 hours over on the Hint Plays channel. And at 8 p.m. I believe that Johnny is streaming more Bloodborne over on his channel. That's www.twitch.tv/Johnny Waistcoat. And then what are we doing for next week? Sasha will be streaming Sims 4 on her channel, I guess, on Monday. And then we are back to next week. Okay, so fingers crossed that Mike will be back up and running next week, but it's still looking a bit iffy at the moment. Yes, Druttercup will be playing The Dark at 8 p.m. on Monday. So tune in for that over at twitch.tv/Druttercup. Monday for American Slogans, yes. So yes, next week's streams are up in the air. Wednesday will definitely be me at 5 p.m. And given that we weren't able to play My Time at Porsche last week, I think I am going to take a look, finally, at Stardew Valley. So join us for Farming Times in that. Saturday and Sunday will have to be up in the air, and may change at short notice. If he is unable to, then I will work something out. So stay tuned to that. If you are a patron, we will let folks know via the Patreon newsletter. For all other folks, stay tuned to our Twitter at the Rusty Quill, or our website, because hopefully this week I am going to get a schedule up on the webpage, up on the website, so that folks can see at a glance what is going on, at least with things around Rusty Towers. So fingers crossed that I can get that done tomorrow. No, I am very aware of my weekend working, Molietsu. So we are looking at ways of making a few changes on the channel. So stay tuned for that. So okay, I am going to head off now. Thank you very much, everyone, again for that. I hope you have found that interesting and enjoyable, and hopefully I will be back with more stories at some point soon. But otherwise, join me on Wednesday for Stardew Valley. Thank you very much, all. Take care, he said. Take care.